Morning I got promoted to VP of Finance. My husband asked me if I'd remembered to schedule his dentist appointment. Not congratulations, not I'm proud of you. He looked up from his phone, coffee in hand, and said, "Hey, did you call Dr. Peterson's office? My cleaning was supposed to be this month." I stood there in the kitchen doorway, still holding my laptop bag, the email from my director still glowing on my screen, and I said yes. Yes, I had called. I had called 3 weeks ago, confirmed the date, added it to his Google Calendar, set him 2 reminders, and written it on the whiteboard by the garage door. "Great," he said and went back to his phone. That was a Tuesday in March. I remember because the cherry tree in our front yard had just started to bloom, and I'd been so happy that morning driving into the office. 33 years old, and I had just been named Vice President of Finance at a mid-sized logistics company in Charlotte. 12 years of working, 4 of them at this company. Nights studying for my CPA while he slept, weekends doing continuing education modules at the kitchen table while he watched football. I had earned this. Every single digit of the $147,000 salary that came with it. I told myself it was fine. He was distracted. He'd been stressed about a freelance project. I'd tell him again at dinner and we'd celebrate properly. Dinner that night was chicken piccata because it was his favorite, and I had learned, somewhere in the 7 years of our marriage, to celebrate my wins by feeding him his preferences. I lit a candle. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving. He noticed the candle. "What's the occasion?" I told him about the promotion again. Gave him the full version this time. The salary, the title, the team I'd be managing. He was quiet for a moment. Then he set down his fork and said, "So you're going to be working even more hours?" Not a question, a verdict. "Probably some longer weeks at the start," I said. "But the pay increase. We should probably talk about the finances," he said. I thought he meant budgeting for the future. Planning. Something forward-looking. I said, "Sure, let's talk." "I think we should separate our accounts," he said. "Keep things cleaner. You make more now. It doesn't make sense to pool everything." I looked at him across the table. The candle was between us. The wine I'd saved was open. "What does that mean exactly?" I asked. He shrugged. "You pay your expenses, I pay mine. Split the household stuff down the middle." Down the middle. I almost laughed. Down the middle would mean I paid half of a mortgage I had qualified us for on my credit score alone, half of utilities in a house I had found, negotiated, and managed every repair on for 4 years, half of groceries I planned and bought, half of the streaming subscriptions I maintained, half of the internet bill I had set up, half of the life insurance policies I had researched and enrolled us in, and he would pay his half. From the freelance work that came in when it came in, which some months was $4,000 and some months was $900. "I'll think about it," I said. He seemed satisfied by that. Finished his chicken, poured himself more wine. I blew out the candle before we did the dishes. I want to be honest here, because I've spent a long time thinking about how I let things get to where they were. I am not someone who was blindsided by a perfect marriage suddenly going wrong. I am someone who watched, very slowly, very clearly, a set of dynamics calcify into something I stopped questioning because I was too exhausted to question anything. When we got married, I was 26 and he was 28. We were both working, both making reasonable money. The plan was partnership. That word partnership, we said it constantly in the early years. We're partners. We figure things out together. What actually happened was this. I'm very good at figuring things out, and he is very good at letting me. It started small, the way it always does. I was better at budgeting, so I managed the accounts. I was better at cooking, so I handled meals. I was better at remembering things, so I kept the calendar. I was better at navigating conflict, so I was the one who called the landlord, dealt with the contractor, handled the conversation when our neighbor's tree fell on our fence. By year 3, I was running our entire life. By year 5, I had stopped noticing. It had become invisible to me the same way it had always been invisible to him. Just the water we swam in. I booked his travel for work trips. I tracked his car registration. I renewed his passport when it expired. I noticed when his parents' anniversary was coming up and reminded him to call his mother. I knew his social security number, his blood type, his preferred seat on airplanes, the name of the barber he liked, and what time they opened on Saturdays. He knew I took my coffee with oat milk. Sometimes, this is the part I have to own. I let it continue, because stopping it felt like a fight I didn't have the energy to start. Because it was easier to just do the thing than to explain why I shouldn't have to. Because somewhere along the way I had absorbed the belief that being capable meant being responsible for everything, and asking for help was somehow a failure of that capability. I enabled it. Every week I enabled it. I need to say that plainly. The week after the promotion conversation, he brought up the separate accounts again. He'd been thinking about it, he said. He'd even looked into it. He thought it made sense. We can each have our own checking, he said. Split the big stuff. Mortgage, utilities, groceries. Then whatever's left over is ours individually. I asked him what that split would look like. He said 50-50. I did the math in my head. I had been doing math in my head since I was 9 years old. It's why I went into finance. 50-50 on the mortgage was $1,340 each. Fine. 50-50 on utilities averaged around $280 each. Fine. Groceries were about $600 a month, $300 each. Internet, streaming, phone plan, roughly 180 split was $90 split was $90 each. So his total obligation at 50-50, around $200 and $1,000. His average monthly income after a variable year, around $3,200. That left him $1,199 a month for everything personal. His car payment, his gym membership, his golf twice a month, his bar tabs with friends, his impulse Amazon purchases, his coffee every morning from the place 4 blocks from his studio. My salary after tax came out to about $8,900 a month. After my $2,000 in household expenses, I'd have $6,890, which sounds like a lot until you consider that I had been quietly subsidizing everything else for years. The anniversary dinner reservations I made, the Christmas gifts to his family that came from our joint account but were chosen, wrapped, and mailed by me, the quarterly pest control, the Costco membership, the vet bills for the dog we had gotten because he wanted a dog. 50-50 in this particular marriage was not 50-50, but I said okay. I said we could try it, because something had shifted in me, something quiet and cold and clarifying. If he wanted separate, we could be separate. The first week I stopped, I didn't stop everything at once. I was deliberate. I made a list, not on paper, in my head, of everything I did that was invisible. Everything I did that he didn't see because he had never needed to see it. I stopped scheduling his dental appointment. I stopped refilling his prescriptions on the joint pharmacy account. I stopped adding things to his calendar. I stopped reminding him that his car was due for an oil change. I stopped noticing when the paper towels were low, when the dish soap was almost out, when the Brita filter needed replacing. I stopped being the person who knew what was for dinner and made sure the ingredients were in the refrigerator to make it happen. I cooked for myself. Healthy, good food. Ate at the kitchen table with a book. Left the kitchen table with a book. Left the kitchen clean behind me. He ordered DoorDash the first night. The second night too. By Thursday, he heated up a can of soup, and I heard him opening every cabinet looking for crackers that weren't there because I had eaten the last of them Monday and not replaced them. I was reading in the living room. He came in and said, "Did we run out of crackers?" "I don't know," I said, which was technically true. I went back to my book. The thing about invisible labor is that when it disappears, the absence is visible. His work trip to Phoenix was in April. He had mentioned it in February. I had, in prior years, researched flights, found him the best non-stop on Southwest, booked it on the card that got travel points, added confirmation numbers to his calendar, found him a hotel 2 blocks from the venue, packed his carry-on checklist into a note on his phone. This year, I did none of those things. He remembered the trip 4 days before. I know because I heard him from the other room on the phone with someone. His business partner, I think, saying he hadn't booked anything yet. He came to me that night. Did you book my Phoenix flight? No, I said. Why not? I looked at him. I kept my voice very even because you didn't ask me to. He stared for a moment. You always book my travel. I used to, I said. We have separate accounts now, separate responsibilities. There was a long pause. The hotel, too, he said. You'll need to handle that yourself, I said. He ended up booking a middle seat on a connecting flight through Dallas. Stayed in a hotel that had a 2.9 rating on Google because the good ones were sold out by the time he looked. Got to Phoenix 3 hours late. He didn't say anything about it when he got home, but something had shifted in his face, a new quality of attention, like a person who has been sleepwalking and suddenly noticed the furniture. His sister came to visit at the end of April, Petra, 2 years younger than him, sharp, no nonsense, worked in HR for a hospital system in Raleigh. We had always gotten along. She was one of the few people in his family who ever asked how I was doing and actually waited for the answer. I had not planned to say anything to her, but on the second evening, while he was in the garage looking for a board game he couldn't find because I had reorganized the storage shelves and hadn't told him where things moved, she and I were alone in the kitchen. She watched me pour 2 glasses of wine and said, "How are you actually?" I told her about the promotion first. She lit up immediately. "Oh my God, VP, that's incredible, congratulations." And I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was clenched. Then she asked how things were at home. I told her, not dramatically. Not as a complaint, just the facts, the way I would present numbers to a board. The accounts, the 50-50, the dental appointment. Phoenix, the crackers. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He's been doing this since he was 12. I asked her what she meant. "Our mom," she said. "She handled everything for him. All of it. He was the oldest son, so she just did everything and called it love." She swirled her wine. I watched it and thought, I'm never doing that for anyone. And I think you've been doing what our mom did, and he has absolutely no idea because he never had to have an idea. She wasn't excusing him. She said that clearly. She was just naming the architecture. "He's not a bad person," she said. "He's someone who needs to actually see the structure before he'll believe it exists." I thought about that for a long time after she went to bed. The conversation happened on a Sunday night in early May. He found me in the study, where I'd started spending more of my evenings. I had a project I was working on, some personal finance modeling I'd been meaning to do for years, a proper net worth tracker, a 5-year projection. And I had found that I genuinely enjoyed the quiet. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he came in and sat in the chair across from me. "I want to talk," he said. "Okay," I said. He was quiet for a moment. I could see that he was choosing words carefully, which was itself unusual. "I've been trying to figure out," he said, "why everything feels harder lately." I didn't say anything. "Things I thought were just done," he said. "They're not getting done." And I'd been annoyed about it, and then I realized. He stopped, pressed his hands flat on his knees. "I realized I was waiting for you to do them, without asking, without even thinking about it. I just assumed you would." The study was quiet. Outside, our neighbor was mowing his lawn, the hum of it faint through the window. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said, "about what the last year looked like, the last few years." He looked at his hands. "I've been thinking about what you do. What you actually do. What you actually do. Not just your job. I know what your job is. I mean here. What you do here." I waited. "I couldn't book a flight," he said. "I know that sounds ridiculous. I'm a 35-year-old man who can't book his own flight without it going sideways. But it wasn't really about the flight." He looked up. "I didn't know where we kept the extra paper towels. I didn't know our internet password. I didn't know our car insurance policy number when I needed to call about a chip in the windshield. I didn't know when the dog shots were due. I didn't know that the pest control company was supposed to come in March, and I had to reschedule them twice because nobody was home." He paused. "You knew all of those things. You always knew all of those things. And I just let you. I just let you know all of them, and I went on not knowing, and I called that normal. I set down my pen. I asked you to split things down the middle, he said. And I think I framed it like it was about fairness, about money. But I think what I actually was doing was, I was protecting my half, my easy, comfortable, already taken care of half. He exhaled slowly. That wasn't fair. It was the opposite of fair, and I'm sorry. I had not let myself expect an apology, not because I didn't believe he was capable of one, but because I had stopped constructing expectations about this. I had been operating in the clear, quiet space of simply doing less and watching what happened. But sitting there, I believed him, not because the words were perfect, because he looked genuinely uncomfortable in the way that people look when they are sitting with something true. I don't want separate finances, he said. I want to actually be equal in this marriage, and I know those aren't the same thing. I was quiet for a moment. They're not, I agreed. We didn't fix everything in one conversation. I want to be clear about that, because I am tired of stories that suggest a single honest moment erases years of accumulated imbalance. It doesn't. What it does is open a door. Whether you walk through it and what you build on the other side is a completely different question. We started seeing a couples therapist. Her name was Dr. Okafor, sharp and no nonsense, the kind of person who would not let either of us be comfortable in our avoidance. She had us each write down, independently, every task we believed we were responsible for in our household. His list had 11 items, mine had 63. We read them out loud in her office and neither of us said anything for a long time. He started handling his own medical appointments, his own travel. He learned where we kept the paper towels and, more importantly, he started noticing when they were low. He started learning to cook 2 meals, then 4. He started doing the grocery run on Saturdays. He set up his own reminder system for things that needed to happen. Car maintenance, family birthdays, the pest control schedule. It was not seamless. He forgot things. He bought the wrong brand of oat milk twice. He scheduled the pest control for the same week I had a board presentation and I had to handle the reschedule anyway, and I was furious about it, and I said so, and we talked about it, and it mattered that we talked about it. The joint account stayed joint. We built a real budget together. Actual shared spreadsheet. Both of us contributing, both of us looking at it monthly. My income is higher than his, and we are honest about that in how we allocate spending. It is not 50-50 in dollars. It is something fairer and more complicated than that. I still catch myself sometimes, starting to do something, adding an event to his calendar, researching something he mentioned eating, and stopping, asking myself whether this is something I'm doing because I want to, or because I have spent so long being the person who does things that I do them on autopilot. Sometimes I do it anyway because I want to, because that's part of being with someone. Sometimes I stop and say, hey, can you handle that? And he does. And that small ordinary thing feels like something it took us years to earn. I got a card from Petra after everything settled. One of those simple ones, blank inside. She had written 4 words. Glad you stayed standing. I keep it in the drawer of my desk in the study, the room that became mine. The room where I finally got quiet enough to hear what I'd been telling myself all along. Promotion or not, salary or not, I had always known my own worth. I just needed him to learn it too. I think about the spreadsheet a lot. Not the budget one my husband and I built together after everything, though that one matters too. I mean the one I made in my head, the night he said 50-50 across a candlelit table, while I did the math in silence and he poured himself more wine. That moment is where I have to start, when I'm honest with myself about what this whole experience actually taught me. Because it wasn't really about money. It never was. It was about what happens when you are so competent, so quietly capable, that the people around you stop seeing the work, and eventually so do you. I spent years believing that doing everything was a form of love, and in some ways it was. But there's a version of that same behavior that is really just avoidance, dressed up as generosity. I avoided the hard conversation. I avoided saying, "This is not sustainable, this is not equal, I am disappearing inside this marriage and I need you to see it." I kept doing the thing instead of naming the problem, and I told myself that was patience. It wasn't. It was a slow surrender of my own voice. What I had to rebuild, and this is the part nobody warns you about, wasn't just the balance in our relationship. It was my own judgment, my ability to distinguish between what I genuinely wanted to give and what I had simply learned to give automatically, without thinking, without choosing. That's a harder line to find than any financial boundary. It required me to sit quietly with myself, in a room that had become mine, and ask, what am I doing because I love this person? And what am I doing because I've forgotten I'm allowed to stop? Petra said something I haven't been able to shake. She said my husband wasn't a bad person. He was someone who needed to see the structure before he'd believe it existed. And I think that's true. But I also think I had made myself so structurally invisible that I had given him no reason to look. The kindest thing I ever did for our marriage was make the absence visible, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. There's a kind of intelligence that takes years to trust in yourself, the kind that says, I know what this is, I know what it's costing me, and I know I deserve more than silence. It took me a long time to act on what I already understood. And the gap between knowing and acting is where so much of our lives quietly drain away. What I'm left with, on the other side of all of it, is something simpler than I expected. My husband does the grocery run on Saturdays now. He bought the wrong oat milk twice, and I told him about it directly instead of just switching it myself. We have a shared spreadsheet we both actually look at. These are small things. They are also not small things at all. The card from Petra is still in my desk drawer. 4 words. I read it sometimes when I forget what standing actually feels like. I think the truest thing I know now is this. The work you do in silence will eventually speak, one way or another. The question is whether you let it speak for you, or whether you finally choose to speak for yourself.